Coach, that story then, the Telegraph front page of their sports supplement interview with Ben Rumsby and the Aleksander Ceferin, the chief executive of UEFA, who says UEFA chief certain that City broke FFP rules. Going back to UEFA's 2-year ban on City in the Champions League, that was overturned by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. But he says, we know we were right. We wouldn't decide if we didn't think we were right. So how bold, how significant a statement from Ceferin in this interview, David?
Yeah, it's extremely bullish and front foot. It's a really good interview by Ben in the Telegraph. It's wide-ranging. They go into all manner of areas. I would suggest people give it a read. And on that particular point, I guess it's not a huge surprise that UEFA stand by their view, because they brought the case, and it would be a bit weak if they said they didn't believe in it. But again, it kind of is history now, what happened with UEFA, and some of the sort of charges were time barred, and others were not proven, the accusations. Now it's all about the Premier League's case, and Richard Masters, the chief executive, says that there is a date penciled in. We don't have any more details of when that date is, where it will take place. We suspect it's going to be a fierce battle, with Manchester City vehemently denying all charges, allegations.
Hit the like button, people. Make sure you're subscribing. This story is going to continue to rumble on until its conclusion. And I already know, but before anyone listens to anything else, oh, Terry's talking about this again. It's one of the biggest, one of the most seismic stories and scandals ever. And it's a scandal in either direction. If City are guilty of widespread corruption, cheating, circumventing of the rules, and essentially fraud, it's gargantuan. If both the UEFA and the Premier League, as per the belief of many City fans and a lot of rival fans, these charges are somewhat fabricated, it's a witch hunt, and they are proven with irrefutable evidence that they are innocent, it's a scandal in the other direction. So to ignore its story, to ignore the conversation and its journey, I think would be irresponsible of any media outlet, any fan, and that's what we're not going to do. This is such a big claim here from the UEFA president, as you can see. We know we were right. We know we were right is the claim. We wouldn't have decided if we didn't think we were right. And I think that's a fair claim. I totally understand where David Ornstein was coming from when he said that it would be a weak position to not believe what you say. Goes on to say that Ceferin stressed he respects the CAS decision, which overturns City's 2-year European ban after ruling the evidence against them was time barred and other accusations were unproven, whilst finding them 10 million euros for failing to comply with the investigation. Why this is significant, though, is the Premier League have stated and have told multiple other journalists that they believe they have more evidence. The charges that were time barred, and by the way, we don't know what CAS's opinion on them would be per se, because they were time barred. So you get a very legal answer in the documentation. The Premier League believe with a more extensive investigation, with more evidence, in more charges, longer period of time to build up their case, no time barring, they believe that they have caught City committing serious corruption, serious fraud against the rules of the Premier League. So when it comes to what UEFA have to say about this matter, I think it does hold an element of water. UEFA haven't softened their approach. They haven't changed their minds. They haven't said, actually, on reflection, we've looked at what CAS have said and we agree. We're not looked into City anymore. I'm sure they're helping the Premier League with their investigations. I'm sure they're saying, right, this is where we went wrong. This is what we should have done. Because it does appear that they believe City are guilty. Therefore, they want them to be punished. They want them to be reprimanded in some way, shape, or form. I want to get your views and opinions on this, though. You may think it's a nothing burger. You may think this is absolutely insignificant. You may believe it is, but the head of European football has come out and said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Man City are guilty of cheating and of fraud and of corruption. That is a huge public claim to make. I want to take a listen here to what Simon Jordan had to say on this situation.
Look, I think there is a perception.
It was overturned.
Well, it was overturned and it was taken a different direction by the Court of Arbitration and Sport. And those that are in City's camp will say, read the detail. And those that are in other people's camp will say, I have read the detail, I just haven't interpreted it the way you have. Right?
I want to stop there. That's a really great point by Simon Jordan. I read some of it and I say, yeah. So if you go through, I've actually got it in front of me right now. If you go through a lot of the adjudications as an example, there are some that quite frankly state that there was no evidence to support claims. There are other elements that say that we're essentially not listening to this claim because it is time barred. I'm not a legal expert. I would never claim to be. But I've seen legal experts claim that City were absolutely cleared and nothing was found. I've seen others interpret it in a very different way. And that is why this new case is key, because it's about how the new panel interpret it. And by the way, there was 3 adjudicators in the CAS case, and it was ruled 2-1. So all it takes this time round is for it to go 2-1, not in their favor, and they are guilty. So it's very important to listen to all sides of the story, in my view.
So the bottom line is that it's interesting because we had this Stefan Borson the other day that talked about the Premier League having a better opportunity as a result of no time limits. And that's not true, he said. Well, I would disagree with that, because if you're committing fraud, then fraud has a much longer statute of limitation. The point...
Well, there is no statute of limitation when it comes to this with the Premier League. Equally, if this case is found not in City's favour, there is no right of appeal. It cannot be taken to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. That is as per a predetermined agreement that all Premier League clubs have with one another, with their partnership. So I think it is significant because there's multiple interpretations over the time-barred evidence and the time-barred charges with UEFA. We have no idea, in reality, how CAS would have found them if they hadn't time-barred them and removed them. You hear and see of this in multiple court cases where a witness may say something, but the judge will say, well, that has to be stricken from the record. Then when it comes to a judgment, a verdict, and then a sentencing, that even though the whole court has heard it, even though they've seen it, even though they know it exists, if that evidence or that statement is now tarnished or is now muddied because of a legal precedent or because of a mistake, it becomes inconsequential to the case. So just because we don't really know, and that is why I think anybody just writing off as a nothing burger should maybe stop.
Is that there is, whether Manchester City like it or not, and the Manchester City fans think that it's a conspiracy theory against them. Me, as a former owner of Crystal Palace, would not have cared the slightest if I was in the division with Manchester City, because they'd have paid more money for my players and I wouldn't have been taking their spot anyway because they're a bigger and better club than me. So I wouldn't have had an agenda. The only agenda I would have had was if you're bucking the system and you're not complying with the rules. I think most people, and irrespective of what the reaction to this, most people that I've spoken to in and around football, positions of influence, and some of them very objective, think that Manchester City have a serious case to answer and that there will be consequences for it. I think they have a serious case to answer. And when they've answered it, we can all be proved wrong or right. My concern is that given the nature of influence and power and what's behind this, and if this were to be found that Manchester City had done the things that they were being alleged, not only would it be a football issue, it would be a diplomatic issue, because all of a sudden the reputation of a nation state would come into play, and the very thing that they wanted football for, which was image laundering and sports washing, whether they like it or they don't, will have been discredited. And that won't be a very good look for them. So that's the reasons why I think in the corridors of power, these deals get done in a different way. And all of a sudden, fait accomplis get dropped and deals get done and situations get managed. But it's interesting.
I understand where Simon Jordan's coming from. I don't agree with every element. But this is why I keep saying to people, ignoring this as a subject, not reading about it, not researching, is key. And also listen to what the other side has got to say. So there'll be some people listening to this saying, no, it's a witch hunt. I don't care about anybody else's opinion. FFP is wrong. Shouldn't even exist anyway. Leave it. There are others that think City are guilty as sin, and there is nothing you can say to them that would change their mind. I happen to sit somewhere in the middle. There is a lot of smoke, and often in life, where there is smoke, there is often fire. At the same time, I'm open-minded enough to listen to this court case when it comes out and say the evidence is there, the evidence is clear. Now, if City win because the Premier League can't prove its position, that may not change a lot of people's minds, because there is a difference between being found not guilty and being proven innocent. As we've alluded to on multiple other scandals and criminal cases that surround football players, there is a fundamental difference. So it's very hard from this point to say, well, if they're not found guilty, Terry, will your mind change or will you view them differently? It all depends on what comes out in court. And there's been a few high-profile court cases in the last few years that I've listened to and followed fairly closely. One was Ryan Giggs and his allegations that were facing him. And crazy revelations came out in both directions in that court case, which changed my whole perception of the situation. You had the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard scenario. Again, wow, look how that turned out. And I think sometimes it's important to go into this and be open-minded. And I also think Manchester City fans should go into this and be open-minded. I know you love your club. Some of you fervently believe that you've done nothing wrong. Some of you are not sure, but you trust, with the likes of Khaldoon saying we've done nothing. You're like, great. He said they've done nothing. I believe it. My view is you should be less subjective, more objective with this, and be open to the idea that there could be a problem. Just for your own standpoint, just for your own well-being, just for your own understanding, because there is the possibility. Why? Let's not pretend that corruption, fraud, cheating, breaking of the system hasn't happened at every level of business in multiple other sports, in multiple nations via their governments and local authorities since the dawn of civilization. So I'm not saying that makes Manchester City guilty. I'm simply stating that the idea that it isn't a possibility is one you should remove. Equally, for balance, rival fans who are absolutely adamant that they are guilty, you should have that same open-mindedness that this is not a stereotypical case of corruption. It could be the atypical side, where actually when all the evidence comes out, you look at it and see, wow, Manchester City have done this the right way. This has been a witch hunt. Maybe there can be some, I still think what City should have done is complied. And I know I'm not a legal expert, but I think they should have complied, and maybe this would have all gone away. And maybe by the end of this, all they're fined for or punished for is the non-compliance, which is a message to every other club. If you've done nothing wrong, we want to see your books. Open up your books. I think a legislation should come in for that anyway. But you have to be open-minded as a rival fan that they may not have done anything significantly wrong in this process. Significantly wrong here. Yes, their grass may have been too long on some games. Yes, that they may have overspent by $1 million here or written off $2 million here that they shouldn't have done. Maybe there's a few small, minuscule things going on, but nothing at the size and scale as being alleged. And I think that's really, really important from my point of view to look at. But we're going to continue to talk about this when new accusations are made, if more leaked emails come out, when big claims are made in the media. We're going to follow this story through to its end. Guilty, not guilty, innocent, unproven, case dropped. Who knows how this is going to go? We'll be there every single step of the way. I'd love to gauge your feelings on this, your understandings, your opinion around what is going on. But a huge seismic claim from the head of European football today that Manchester City are guilty of cheating, corruption, and essentially fraud. Until next time, take care, goodbye, God bless, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.